And good morning, everyone. We welcome you to another edition of After Further Review. I'm Dave DeNatale along with Jay Crawford. Here's the good news. The bye week is here. The Browns are 5-3. The bad news is, Jay Crawford, that was a rough go on Sunday afternoon for the Browns, losing to the Raiders 16-6.
It's almost like they didn't know that game counted yesterday. I don't know where the spark was, Dino. I don't know where the energy was, but if you juxtaposition that with what we saw the previous Sunday against the Bengals, where even though they came out to a slow start, there was energy, there was fire, there was passion, there was a sense of urgency. I didn't sense or see any of that yesterday, and I think to me, that's the biggest concern. I know that they're playing with, a mass unit of stars watching this, but I was really concerned with what I saw yesterday. That was as poor an effort as we've witnessed. Obviously the Steelers and the Ravens games were the same thing, but it wasn't good, and I hope we don't get that Browns the rest of the season.
Yeah, it was, I know it was a windy day, it was a cold day, there were external elements to that, but that doesn't excuse getting physically dominated by the Raiders, especially the Raiders offensive line to the Browns defense in their front seven. I mean, the Raiders time of possession was just, ridiculously good compared to the Browns. Yeah. Browns defense couldn't get off the field. We'll get to the offense in a second, but that was just, to me, we've talked all year, the Browns defense isn't, where it needs to be, and it's not as talented as I think we'd all like it to be. And they've been able to succeed by forcing turnovers. Well, they couldn't force turnovers yesterday, so they couldn't succeed.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think the thing that was most disappointing is I know Nick Chubb wasn't on the field, but the Browns are the third best rushing attack in the NFL. And I think even with Kareem Hunt back there, they probably wouldn't be third in the league without Chubb for the season. But the fact of the matter is this team has been a run team. Third in the NFL running the ball, 27th in the NFL passing the ball. They were never down by 2 scores until very late in the game. So why then did we have 25 passes and 22 runs playing in a wind tunnel? It was clear that you weren't going to be able to throw the ball. And I think the other thing that was clear to me was, we talked about this one other time during this season in which there were a lot more points scored, but all of them were scored with the team's wind at its back. It was the same thing yesterday with the exception of one field goal. So I know we didn't see a lot of points, but 19 of the 22 points were scored with the wind at their back. So I was happy to see them come out with that sense of urgency in the third quarter when it was going to be their last chance having the wind at their back. They take the ball, they march down the field. It was their one successful drive. And even though they didn't end up scoring a touchdown, the Raiders get the ball with 8:47 to go. And there's your urgency. You have to get them off the field because you're not going to have the wind at your back in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
The Raiders proceed to go the length of the field in an almost 9-minute drive. They completely evaporated the third quarter. And there was a third and long in that sequence. And there were 3 of the 4 drives had third and longs. One had a 3rd and 18. And the Browns just couldn't get them off the field. They pick up the first down on the 3rd and 8. And you got the sense at that point, game over, because they weren't going to get the ball with the wind the remainder of the game. And I have this in my column this morning, but the Browns on 3rd and 4th down combined this year the opponents are 54% successful at picking up the first downs. And Dino, that number on 4th down, the Browns have only had 1 4th down stop in 14 tries. That's a recipe for disaster. It's worst in the NFL. And even at 54% on 3rd and 4th downs, you're not going to win many football games doing that. And they forced one Raiders punt yesterday. They didn't force the Bengals to punt at all last Sunday. You can't get your defense off the field, you're not a 500 team. And I'm afraid that even though the record says we're 5-3, Dino, that's more of a statement as to who our opponents are than who we are. And I've maintained that throughout the year. And I think now, because we lost to the Raiders and they're going to be one of the teams that we're jockeying for a wild card spot with, I think it's pretty apparent that the Browns now become a long shot to make the playoffs. Even though their schedule is the easiest remaining schedule in the NFL. They still have the Ravens, they still have the Steelers, they still have the Titans. So if you throw L's at all three of those, you're now 5-6 with 5 games remaining against all winnable teams, but you have no room for error. You have to win all 5 of those games to finish 10-6 and hope, because 10-6 doesn't always punch your ticket. It likely will, but it's possible that it won't. So I think it's an uphill climb the rest of the way now.
Yeah, this feels more like a 9-7 type of a team, and you know, I mean, 9-7. You really have to have everything working for you to get in a lot of times in the playoffs. I'm concerned. We'll wait and see. We haven't heard about Myles Garrett's MRI yet, but you know, that's a concern. I was pleased with the way Olivier Vernon played, but you know, without Garrett's presence, and he only played about half of the snaps. It's just the defense already is problematic. But when you don't have Myles at 100%, that just obviously takes a big scare element away from your defense.
Well, there's no one that you really fear. I mean, there's guys that you want to stop and you want to double team on the line. But with Myles Garrett out, everybody else is less of a defensive football player, because there's so much more attention now that the offensive line can shift to the other guys. You know, there's nobody that you have to fear can dominate you on any given play. So with Myles out, and you know, I know he played about half the snaps, but let's face it, he wasn't the Myles Garrett that we've seen throughout the year. He was clearly hobbled. So it's going to be a tough stretch from here. It's interesting because now with the trade deadline looming, I felt like the Browns had to get something done in the back end of their defense. I don't know that that's as pressing now, because this team isn't. If it is a playoff team, it's a one and done playoff team. I don't know that you want to waste trade resources to improve, let's say, at safety, when you know there's help coming back next year from either injury or free agency or the draft. So, you know, I was disappointed that they hadn't made a move up to this point. Now, if they don't, I kind of get it. They're probably seeing the same thing that we're seeing when you project the schedule out. Not saying they're white flagging it, but this isn't a team ready to make a playoff run. That's obvious.
Right. Right.
And, you know, as much as we'd like to say we've turned a corner on offense, you know, in our 3 losses, we've scored 6, 7, and 6 points. So I don't look at this offense as one of the league's even upper half. And maybe with Chubb, that's a different story. Maybe with Chubb in there, they are one of the better offenses in the NFL, but and our offense is clearly lower tier, probably bottom 6 in the NFL all the way around. So I just don't think that it's realistic to hope this team can put together a playoff run this year. So I don't know that they're going to waste any resources. But, you know, on the Myles Garrett thing, when you slice it this way, take any team's best running back, best wide receiver, one of its best linemen, its best tight end, and the best defensive player out of the mix for a game. I don't know many teams that are going to be able to hang in there and win a game, regardless of who it's against. And this Raiders team is clearly a playoff team too. I mean, I know they struggled mightily against the Patriots last week, but you know, this is a team that's proven they can beat the best. That, you know, they knocked the Chiefs off, and you know, I think this is going to be a team that's definitely in that playoff picture come late December. So I don't know that we're going to make moves or not. I would have been disappointed before, but and I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, Dino, but I just don't see this team as a team that can make any noise at all in the playoffs, just based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, because likely if you get in, you're probably going to have to play the Chiefs or actually not even, I don't even know how the seedings would work. Maybe
well, there's extra wild cards this year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, look, it's going to be the Chiefs, the Ravens, or the Steelers. How do you like them?
Correct. Correct.
I mean, so I don't think that. I mean, those are teams that are clearly in another stratosphere.
Right.
We've seen what the Ravens and the Steelers did to the Browns. Oh my goodness, what would the Chiefs offense do to this defense? They would embarrass them. So, it's just, as much as we wanted to think that this was the real thing, I've called it fool's gold all year, and I still stand by that. Look, I mean, it doesn't mean you give up. It doesn't mean that you stop trying to, win games. You've got the Giants, you've got the Eagles, you've got very winnable games coming up on the schedule. A bye will help to get everybody healthy, but before you can make a playoff run, there's a chronology that you have to go through. You go from bottom feeder and the low end of the talent cycle to 5-7, 6-10, or a 5-11, 6-10, which was where we were last year. Then you got to take another step, 9-7, 10-6, experience what that next gear of football looks like, get a playoff game. So when you do get to that 11-5, 12-4, you're not a spotlit deer in that first playoff game when the other team hits you harder in the mouth than you've been hit in the mouth all year. So the hope would be somehow get to 10-6, experience a playoff game, and then you're ready to take that next step in the progression. So it's a long process. Nobody goes from 0 to 100 in a season. It's too hard to do. The Browns aren't going to do it. And, you build on the draft, you make a couple of key free agent signings. Given the fact that our safety play this year has looked like a good Division I team, that's just not good enough in the NFL. And our play at the back end of our defense has been atrocious. And it's something that, we thought we addressed with the draft. And then, injuries happen. Yeah, injuries happen. So let's hope that he heals. He's strong coming back to next year. You can use more safety help in this upcoming draft. You need linebacking help for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I see Taki make a play, and I'm thinking maybe. But then there's other times where he misses tackles, and he missed a key one yesterday on a third down conversion. You just can't get that kind of poor play out of such a vital position. So we'll wait and see, man. It's, I'm glad the bye is here because we need it.
Yeah, I mean, they looked like they looked like a team that was like, had the gas gauge was at empty, and it's like, yeah. I mean, it really did. Offensively, the play calling disappointed me, but the unforced errors really just disappointing. The drop passes. Harrison Bryant's fumble, which obviously really ended up looming large as the way the game went. That was another case to back up your point. Not quite ready for prime time yet with this team.
It's a good point. Now, look, the good news is even without our best running back, wide receiver, tight end, defensive star, clearly not at 100%, and you're still down one of your top linemen, you can take, and this is the NFL, so I even hate playing this game, but you can still take 2 or 3 plays from that game. I thought they got shafted on the touchdown reversal, to be completely honest with you. I thought the replay officials yesterday were inconsistent with some of their rulings. But, you give the Browns a touchdown there, and the Renfro touchdown to me didn't look like a touchdown. I mean, I thought I knew what a touchdown looked like, but every week I'm realizing that I still don't. So if you flip those reversals, and let's face it, they were both, millimeter plays. So if you flip those reversals, that's an 8-point swing. So now it's a 2-point game, and that really magnifies the Bryant fumble because you're taking points off the board.
Right.
The missed field goal, you're taking points off the board. So it's not like it was the Ravens and the Steelers where there weren't two plays that you could point to. This is a loss that there are no good losses, but this is a loss where when you stack everything on top of one on each other, the injuries, the plays that went against us, the fluky things here or there, it's easily a game the Browns could have won. Couldn't say that about the first two losses.
Yeah. All right, we have a couple minutes here before we get done here, and we've got the bye week next week, so we won't have a show for 2 weeks. Give me your first half of the Browns season. I know who your defensive MVP is going to be, but I'll ask you your offensive MVP and your defensive MVP.
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to I wrote the column more based on yesterday's game, but because the game was so boring and disappointing, I almost wrote a grade card column, sort of midterm grades. And I thought about that while I was watching the game. So clearly the defensive MVP, I think without question, is Myles Garrett. I think honorable mention, Denzel Ward has had a tremendous season to this point. I think, and a lot more is being asked of him because the back end of that defense is so suspect. He's got to be perfect. And he damn near has been. So I think he's honorable mention. I think, though, on offense, it's really interesting because, you know, I'm stunned Jarvis Landry doesn't have a touchdown. Touchdown catch. This team, if you would have told me that Odell Beckham would be out at week 7 and Jarvis Landry wouldn't have a touchdown after week 8, what's the Browns' record? I would have said 2-6, and that would have been being nice. And by the way, Chubb has missed the last couple of games. So I don't know that there is an offensive MVP individually. Collectively, even though they didn't show it yesterday, I would say the offensive line. Because, Dino, it wasn't that long ago that our offensive line was the Achilles heel of the entire football team.
Totally.
I think they're one of the more optimistic position groups so far this year. They've had to move some parts. They've had some injuries. I think Wills has played very well for a rookie. He still clearly is blowing some assignments and missing some things here and there. But I think the line has been pretty damn good. And in general, I think when we get Chubb back, the Browns need to recommit to the ground game the second half of the season. They absolutely, because look, this is a division where you have to run it in December. The run always travels. The two things that travel is running game and defense. And that's why so often when you go to look at who's left at the end of the season, last year, the 49ers had a great defense and a terrific run game. The Chiefs made it to the Super Bowl. The Chiefs are diverse on offense, but their defense stepped up. And I don't know that there are playing conditions that will stop the Chiefs offense just because their quarterback has proven he can get it done in anything. So I don't know about an offensive MVP. Who do you have on offense and defense?
Defense, definitely Myles.
Right.
Offense, I was struggling. I got to tell you, I was struggling too. If you pinned me down and said name a player for 8 games, I mean, I might say Kareem Hunt. From all the touchdowns and everything he's done. It probably would have been Wyatt Teller, to be honest, before his injury, because I think he's been such a big part of the offensive line. But I agree. It's easier, I think, to say, okay, the play of the year than it is necessarily the player of the year. So
sure, I think you're right.
Offense.
Yeah, I think you're right. Obviously Chubb was having a Pro Bowl season before his injury. Let's hope he comes back and he has he looks like the same Nick Chubb, because oftentimes the closer you get to a knee injury on return, the more that player looks like something less than what he was before the injury. Sometimes it takes a full off season and rehab before they come back at 100%. But the good news is they made it to 5-3 at the turn. They will play meaningful football into November and likely into the month of December. And even though I don't see a playoff spot in this team's future this year, I think they're going to contend for one up until the last game of the season. And, as you look at that progression chart, you go 6-10, you go battling for a playoff spot, you go getting a playoff spot, and then that next step is Super Bowl run. Are you mature enough now? Do you have all the holes plugged to where you can try to make it to a Super Bowl? I tell you, watching that Browns or that Ravens Steelers game yesterday, it became more apparent to me than ever. We already knew it based on our two outcomes against those teams this year. We have light years to go before we can get on a football field and play with either one of those teams for 4 quarters. I see them beating us the second time around, maybe not as handily, but I don't see any way in the world the Browns beat either one of those teams. And you'll never win this division. You can write this down. You will never win this division if you're 0-4 against the Steelers and the Ravens. It's almost a mathematical impossibility. And so that they're going to have to find a way to split those 4 games before they can really seriously think about, being a team that can contend for a Super Bowl.
Win in your division and win at home. That's always the forecast for me to get to the playoffs. Jay, great stuff, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And
very good, Dino.
Coming up at 5 o'clock today for
All right, my friend. We'll see you soon.
All right. For Jay Crawford, I'm Dave.